I think that's an excellent idea, Peter, because I couldn't log on the other day, and
Right,
I was hoping today was going to be worth working, and it is.
right. That's great, Martin. You may have seen that we have a chat going. That's probably at the bottom of your screen. I think there are 9 messages on there as well already. We'd invite you all to just put your email address in and your locality, your council. It just means that we can stay in touch and update you with information as things go on. So if you are able to do that, that would be really useful. And the final point, I think, is to thank all those councils. I'm sure some of them are here this afternoon, who very kindly copied it in, the Somerset Bus Partnership, on their proposals which have been submitted to Somerset, so that we've had sight of those. That's really useful and very much appreciated. So at this point, I'm going to try and share my screen. You'll see that our email address is there at the bottom. It's a long one, but it's a very easy one to remember. It's somersetbuspartnership@gmail.com. Please get in touch with us through that, or through any of the co-chairs that we have, if you happen to know them. So why have we got a Somerset Bus Partnership? It's because Bus Back Better, which was launched in March, made it quite clear that going forward, local transport authorities, which for us the main one is Somerset County Council, are going to play a pivotal role in the future of our bus services. Most local transport authorities are going to do that through an enhanced partnership, which is what the route that Somerset's going to go down. Some of the larger ones are going to be exploring the possibilities of going into a franchise arrangement. Manchester fairly controversially has indicated they want to go down that route, and that's the route that essentially London has been doing for many, many years. So Bus Back Better, though it had been in gestation for 2 years prior to the announcement in March, was announced in March by the Prime Minister, who's personally backed it very strongly. Boris Johnson has said many times he loves buses. Of course, as an ex-mayor of London, he saw the success of buses in London, which were quite differently funded from the rest of the country. So given the pivotal role of Somerset County Council, we felt that we should find an umbrella group which could help try and coordinate the action of councils from across the county and bus groups, bus campaigning groups from across the county. And also many of us know the bus operators as well, who will be in direct conversations with Somerset. So we were formed in March. We have 4 co-chairs, and not in any way reflecting any opposition to one Somerset, whatever individuals might feel. We allocated a co-chair for each of the districts: Tony Rees for South Somerset, Glenn Burrows, who's on the call today with me from Sedgemoor, John Hassel from Somerset West and Taunton, and I'm from Mendip. I'm located in the village of Road, just outside of Frome. You can find out on a daily basis what Somerset Bus Partnership is saying and doing if you follow us on our Facebook page, which has got quite active of late. Just put into the Facebook search Somerset Bus Partnership and you'll get to our page there. So I'm going to give you something of the backstory to where we are today, particularly here in Somerset, and then we can talk about how we go forward from here. The backstory goes back a long way. It goes back to the days of Mrs. Thatcher's very radical conservative government, because back in the mid-80s, one of the many policies and initiatives she launched was the deregulation of bus services, which had previously been very much controlled by local authorities. She felt, and I think the evidence has probably borne that out very truthfully, that they could be run a lot more cost effectively if they were left to private operators. And so that was what she chose to do. Routes had to be commercially viable, or in some cases, they could be still subsidized by the local authority. But the level of subsidy dropped dramatically after bus deregulation, as unfortunately did the number of people who went on buses, because a lot of bus routes got scrapped. There was another dip, which you can just about see at the end of this chart, after the financial crisis of 2008, and we had the period of austerity when county council budgets were ruthlessly slashed by central government, and county councils had to make savings. Some, including Somerset, allowed the full brunt of those savings to fall on bus subsidies. Other councils took a slightly different approach. What is interesting over that same period is that buses in London, which was quite separately funded and well funded, continued to grow in usage for most of the period, as indeed did the rail network, as indeed did the underground and light rail and tram network. It's buses which were increasingly looking like yesterday's bus travel option. And it was really a big surprise, especially to bus campaigners, when this government said that buses were a key part of their policies, and we can talk more about that in a moment. But where did all these cutbacks, how do they impact on Somerset? Well, quite severely. Today pre-COVID, we had a situation of only 10 bus journeys per resident, which means that we have the fourth lowest bus passenger journeys per head of population in the whole country. And it's also the lowest in the Southwest. So here's the bottom five. One doesn't like being in the bottom five, but as you can see, Somerset is just ahead of Herefordshire and Windsor, but is there as the fourth lowest. And it has very much happened over the past 10 years during the period of austerity and cuts to Somerset's council grant from central government. Looking through to 2018, Somerset saw a 35% drop in numbers of journeys over those 9 years. It's one of the biggest drops, as you can see, across the country, and we weren't starting off in that great a position in the first place. But it didn't have to go that way. We can see Bristol showing a 52% increase in bus usage, and Bath and North East Somerset a 30% increase, and South Gloucestershire a 28% increase. So there were other ways of addressing the challenges of central government cuts in funding to county councils, but buses were very hard hit in Somerset, and actually it accelerated the rate of decline, because if we look at it now going up to 2019, so another year on from there, we're now up to a 43% drop over a 10-year period. I mean, it's unimaginable for a similar policy to have been adopted towards car users. What in effect was happening, because back in 2010, Somerset County Council decided they would not fund any more evening services. So it meant anybody who needed to get back and relied on subsidized evening services from college or from work no longer could travel. It's inconceivable. We could say to car drivers, you can't drive in the evening, but in effect, that's what they were saying to a lot of bus passengers. But that's all the past. It's also the present, but the future is looking much more exciting because of Bus Back Better, because Boris Johnson's government has set reference points for every local authority in the country in terms of what is expected of buses going forward. One of the most important ones is on any significant route that there should be evening and weekend services. Why is it so important to them? It's not just because Boris happens to like buses. It's because there is a real need to address the issue of climate emergency. And one of the key ways of doing that is addressing the amount of car travel, particularly single occupancy car travel. And one of the real alternatives to that is going by bus, but only if there is a frequency and a quality of service that makes it attractive enough to persuade a car driver to leave their car at home and get on the bus. And so it's a key component in this all-important climate emergency policy of the government. And for many councils across the country, increasing the amount of bus journeys and reducing particularly single occupancy car journeys is a really crucial issue for them. So climate emergency is one reason why this government is backing buses. And the other reason, my chart shows, there we are. Oh yes, one factor here is why do they do it? One double decker, as we know, can take 75 cars off the road. The other reason is the government's levelling up agenda, because buses are disproportionately used by less advantaged social groups, and they deserve a better quality of transport. And so buses, again, are very, very important in this government's other policy stretch, which is levelling up. And it's interesting to note that outside of London, women make 21% more bus journeys than men. So this is also a policy to help women who have to rely that much more on buses than men currently do, to give them a better quality of bus service. It's not just about more buses, it's a better quality of buses. It's a better quality of buses. So let's look at what, if everybody could just mute themselves, I think we're getting some feedback. So where are we? What does Bus Back Better bring? First thing is they're talking about more frequent bus services. They're talking about on main town routes and intertown routes, buses that come almost often enough that you don't have to worry about a timetable every 10 or 15 minutes. Certainly on rural routes, looking for a frequency of an hour. And many rural routes, as you will know, across Somerset, have a frequency of every 2 or every 3 hours, or even less than that.
Or nil.
Then we have evening and weekend services, and I think for Somerset this has the potential for being a giant step forward. These days people rarely work from 9 to 5. They're likely to be starting earlier and finishing later. And in many cases, particularly with those in the service industry, they're not quite sure each day what time they will finish, because if they're in the restaurant business, for example, they will finish when their shift ends, and there will be flexibility on it. What the government has said is that evening and weekend services are a core component of any bus service. And I think that for Somerset is a big step forward. Improving coordination between bus services and other transport modes, particularly rail, but also looking at the feasibility of hubs where, for example, people could cycle to those hubs, leave their bikes there, and then travel the final distance through on a bus, or even walking to transport hubs and traveling by bus. Improving bus priority schemes, particularly in the larger towns, putting in bus lanes. There is, of course, an issue in many of our villages whereby, because there are now so many cars, the cars are parked in the high streets of small villages, and that can often delay buses getting through. It's an issue to challenge parish councils, not least my own, as to how one deals with that. And for certain parts of Somerset, demand responsive transport has worked very well. There is a councillor on this call who will tell you that it's working very well in his area. It is one of the options that is being considered. Then the whole issue of fares. Bus fares have gone up disproportionately quickly when one compares it with the cost of motoring. Even when the price of petrol was falling through the floor, there was no attempt to try and charge more for the price of petrol in taxation. The car driver has been very much protected in a way that the bus passenger has not been protected. And there's also a need to look at the issue of, if you get on one operator's bus, but then have to get onto another operator's bus to continue your journey, you're having to buy two separate tickets, and that can be very expensive. So there needs to be a way of looking at multi-operator ticketing. And then the issue of young people. If senior citizens can get a discounted rate, what about young people? Should they get any preferential rate? So there are a lot of things which need to be tackled in terms of fares. And we know that Somerset Bus Service Improvement Plan will be looking at that as an issue. And then an issue which is very dear to my heart, which is the information. If you don't know the time of your bus, you're not going to be able to go and get on that bus. So there is a need to make sure that the information about buses is accurate and better available. And the place where you want it most is at the bus stop. Now, currently, I estimate that over 90% of the bus stops which have got bus times on have got erroneous, false information, out of date information, which is inconceivable in any other form of advertising. The Advertising Standards Authority would rule that as being totally unacceptable, having a timetable which is not accurate and is in fact misleading. And most of the timetables at our bus stops are. It's an issue we've raised with Somerset and say that they've really got to address. Of course, there are other ways of doing it. There's real-time information on bus shelters and bus stops, and we're beginning to see that roll out, particularly in some of our towns. And it is the most effective way of promoting bus usage. If you've got a display above your head telling you that there's a bus coming, heaven forbid, anything more than 10 or 15 minutes away, but if it's coming in the near future, then there's every chance that you're likely to go and use that bus service. then, of course, there are all the apps which are out there. Sadly, there's an awful lot of information on the internet, which again has out-of-date information, but the apps, for the most part, are very accurate. And so if you've got a smartphone, and like Glenn, who doesn't have a smartphone, but if you've got a smartphone and if you've got a good enough reception at your bus stop, you can actually track the bus as it's approaching, and you will know when it's coming. And indeed, if sadly it's had to be cancelled, you'll be forewarned. So that's that, and real-time information displayed at the bus stops are the best ways. But good old-fashioned bus timetables, a number of parish and town councils have door-drop bus timetables around the locality, and that's worked well in terms of increasing passenger usage, because again, passengers know when the buses are coming. So it's a very, very important issue, and we hope that Somerset will seize it and look at doing something about improving the quality of bus information and timetable information which is out there. Anyway, that was the plan 2 years ago when it first started to emerge in the corridors of power in Whitehall. And then we had coronavirus, devastating for so many businesses and sadly devastating for so many lives as well. But one of the consequences of coronavirus were the lockdowns and a government advising, understandably, that people shouldn't use public transport because of the risk of spreading the virus. Things, fortunately, are getting a lot better, but initially there was a catastrophic fall in bus usage. Just at the time the government was beginning to decide a policy for driving bus usage fell to some 15% of what it was pre-COVID. By June of this year, it was up to about 60%, and it's probably now running at something like 75%. The worrying consequence of that is that it means that probably most bus routes at the moment are not commercially viable. We need to get the numbers up and above the pre-COVID levels, certainly back to the pre-COVID levels, for those bus services to re-establish their commercial viability. What that means is that in the interim, the government is funding all those bus services and indeed funding all the rail services. It's costing an enormous amount of money. And so it's costing a lot more money to keep the rail services going than the bus services, but it's costing both a lot of money. There is a real need to get bus usage up and indeed rail usage up. And it's simply unacceptable to the towns and cities of this country to see people switch to cars, because we will just, as the return to work continues, we will just have perpetual gridlock. So we need to see a strong move back to the use of public transport. And I think we will see action taken by especially the larger cities to drive a return to public transport, including back to buses. So that's the backdrop to it all. That's the challenge that Somerset took on when they decided that they would work towards an enhanced partnership, which means the local authority, transport local authority, working with the bus operator, and to embark on a bus service improvement plan, a BSIP, for Somerset. And all the neighbouring authorities around us are doing their own BSIPs. And of course, those neighbouring authorities have an impact on Somerset buses. because, for example, up in the north of Somerset, we have buses coming in from Wecker, particularly from Bristol and Bath, from Wiltshire, from Trowbridge and Westbury and beyond, from Dorset and from Devon. So the cross-border routes are also important. And it's, if you have cross-border routes into your area, it's important that you voice your issues, your concerns, not just to Somerset, but also to the neighbouring authority. So as I'm in the north of the area, I've written to both Wecker and Wiltshire about how buses which emanate out of those local authorities impact on essentially Mendip. So that's what Somerset is working on at the moment, the BSIP. And it's a breathtakingly challenging timetable. They had to decide whether they were going to embark on an enhanced partnership in July to try and help them do all the work that was going to be required. The government, if they committed to an enhanced partnership, gave them £100,000, very substantial sum of money. And there was an expectation that many local authorities, possibly most local authorities, would need consultancy help. Somerset has in fact turned to one of the world's leading transport consultancies, WSP, who are working also with Dorset and no doubt with other local transport authorities. They are expert at being able to give the guidance, the input and the advice that Somerset need to develop this BSIP. And they're working very closely with the council transport team at Taunton on developing a BSIP. And they haven't got very much time. It's got to be sent to government by the end of next month. So they're 3/4 of the way through the time that they've got allotted to do this task. And it is a big task, and they are going to be deeply challenged to complete it, but they clearly have to do so. Once the BSIP has been approved, and the BSIP is essentially an outline of what they want to do, and then a bid for money, and there won't be enough money to enable all the BSIPs to be done. So the real test of how good WSP will be is how well they ensure that the Somerset BSIP persuades the government that Somerset deserves the money to fund its BSIP in full. So that is going to be the criteria that we can assess the value of WSP to Somerset and to all of us. And once Somerset know how much the money they're getting, then they have 6 months to put that into operation with all the bus operators. Now, any one of you who's had any involvement with bus companies, trying to get them to change their bus timetables, the times of the buses through your village or your town or past your bus stop, you will know what a hugely complex process that is for the bus operator to make any changes, to make changes of this scale, and to work for the first time really in partnership with the local transport authority, and to have to do this in the timescale of 6 months. It is going to be a really big stretch, and we wish them well, because it's in our interests, all our interests, that they succeed in that. It's likely that the Somerset BSIP will have to be approved. We think, we don't know this for sure, that it will have to be approved by the Cabinet of Somerset County Council, and they have a meeting on October the 20th. It's possible they will delegate the power to approve it to officers, but it's probable that it will be on that day that the BSIP will get finally approved. So we're talking about a month from now, and there's still an enormous amount of work to be done, as I've heard from the consultant who's working on this at WSP. So the briefing that they gave us last Friday was to tell us just what they've done so far, and they've been doing a lot of work. Firstly, it's been very important that whatever policy proposals are put forward by Somerset, they're in line with a whole raft of other policy proposals that the government has been developing over the last 2 or 3 years. It's one of the major roles that WSP can play, is advising them to ensure that the policy proposals are in accordance with the analyses and the proposals which have been developed by the government. They've been doing a lot of desk research, and of course they've been reading all our submissions, and they've had a lot of submissions sent to them. They also tried to do a survey of people across Somerset. They only got a modest number of responses. It was always going to be a difficult thing to do, but they tried. They've also looked at the demographics of Somerset, and one of the things you see when you see a population map of Somerset is just how many pale greens there are, which means that there aren't many people in large tranches of Somerset, which of course makes it quite difficult to operate a commercially viable bus service, as many of those communities in those less populated areas know to their costs. They also looked at accessibility maps. This might have been quite an interesting thing for the district councils to look at, because here's an accessibility map of how easy is it to get and how long does it take to get to our county town, Taunton, by public transport. And you can see for all those areas which are in white, it takes more than 2 hours. And this is in the middle of the day, incidentally. If you look at the same map at night time, there's virtually nobody who can get in and out of Taunton. So it demonstrates the problems of getting access to the urban centres of Somerset, and also similar maps have been produced to look at the problems and the challenges of getting to the urban centres of neighbouring local authorities. Most notably, I've mentioned them a couple of times, Bath and Bristol, but all around Somerset, there are towns which play an important part in the lives of people in Somerset villages, albeit they're not actually in Somerset themselves. They looked at something called Mosaic, which is a socio-demographic mapping tool, which is there to show the different nature of the populations in different parts of Somerset. To a very large extent, you'll see there are 14 different colours, but the only colours you can really see is 2 shades of green, which shows that most of Somerset belongs to most localities within Somerset are dominated by 2 types of neighbourhood types, both of which are rural. And yes, there are 1 or 2 towns there that we well know, but most of Somerset is a remarkably rural county, which has its own challenges for bus operations. So the survey I mentioned, they did a survey, and it said only 8% of respondents across Somerset were satisfied with Somerset's bus services. This survey was done during the summer. An identical survey, virtually identical survey, was done in Dorset, and 27%, still not a good figure, but 27% were satisfied with the bus services in Dorset. So it's useful to have that comparison. There is a far greater level of dissatisfaction in Somerset. And actually, when you look at the dissatisfaction, 70% were dissatisfied, actually said they were dissatisfied. Over a quarter of all respondents said that they were very dissatisfied.
Yeah,
there is another national mapping of satisfaction levels of all local authorities in England, and Somerset is bottom of that list, and that's a government survey which is done. There is, without question, a huge level of dissatisfaction with bus services as they currently stand, which is why the BSIP for Somerset is so vitally important. It is our opportunity to try and get government money to improve the bus services that we have here in Somerset. And surely there is no better case to put than the level of our bus services needs help, probably almost more than any other part of the country. They asked what level of satisfaction is there, but they also asked what do they most want to have improved. And there will be no surprise with this. More frequent early morning services, because a lot of people have to get to work early or need to get onward travel elsewhere on an early morning train. But the biggest one of the lot is more evening and weekend services. So many people have told me in our conversations going around parish councils and town and city councils in Somerset that yes, we could get to work, but the buses aren't running, and so we can't get back from work. Or we have to work at weekends and there aren't any buses. So this policy that Somerset has had for the last 10 years of not supporting evening bus services, and in truth, supporting very few weekend services, one hopes that the BSIP and government funding can get that policy changed. So the feedback, as WSP and Somerset County Council have summarised it last Friday, is there are problems over the fares. There are too many tickets which aren't multi-operator tickets, and fundamentally, the fares are too expensive for the quality and amount of service they're getting. These are the findings of Somerset County Council and their consultants. There is a lack of services, poor connectivity between communities and where they need to get, not just for work, but shopping and hospital. And the timetables, the hours that the buses are running, just aren't fit for purpose. Interchange, because the government wants to encourage rail travel as a better option than traveling long distance by car, there is a need to improve the connectivity with rail stations where we have rail stations. There aren't a lot in Somerset, and to try and ensure that the timetables interact together. The problem of information, my particular bugbear, the fact that so much of it is simply out of date and unreliable and below standard. Need to look at concessionary fares and a recognition that by the people who they talk to that, yes, we realise this is going to cost quite a lot of money, which is why the Somerset BSIP has got to ask for quite a lot of money. It's interesting, I've just changed the screen, but you'd barely notice any difference. These are the findings from an identical study in Dorset. These are the sorts of messages which are coming back from the very rural counties. So that's enough from me, perhaps more than enough for me. I'm now going to hand over the screen to Glenn Burrows, one of the co-chairs, So I'm going to stop sharing. And once I've stopped sharing, Glenn will try and start sharing. And here she is.
Has that worked?
It's worked perfectly.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, thanks, Peter, and hello, everybody. I'm a member of Bridgewater Town Council, also a retired rail worker, so I have a particularly passionate interest in public transport and certainly in integration. So I'm just going to finish up Peter's very important introduction to the background by suggesting some of the next steps, because Peter has said quite rightly, we're at a pretty exciting time. The future is looking good. It's cheered a lot of us up to see that the government has a strategy, and it's also cheered us up to see Somerset County Council, who frankly have not always been well known for their responsiveness and interest in transport. So it's been very good to see them taking this on board and recognising the problems. And I think of particular importance, I mean, there are 24 people here. We had 50 people at the call on Tuesday. For me, a very exciting aspect of the work of the Bus Partnership has been to bring together so many representatives of town and parish councils. I'm a fairly new town councillor, but I don't remember any other such occasion. And, I think we have really woken the council up to the feelings and about the importance of bus travel. And for me, the first next step must be to maintain that momentum, to maintain those links and to maintain that pressure on the county council in terms of public transport, because it doesn't end in October the 21st. That will be the final date for the submission of the improvement plan, but I think our work must go on, our feedback, our engagement and our consultation. And with that in mind, I just want to mention, I mean, I've said that I think that I'm a chair of the Bridgewater Transport Forum. We seem to have been the only, perhaps I'm wrong, we seem to have been the only town council trying to put pressure on the county council to reinstate the County Transport Forum. And I think out of this engagement exercise ought to come demands from all over Somerset, because had there been a county transport forum in existence, and it was dissolved in about 2010, Somerset County Council would have had a forum at its disposal already to start the consultation. So I think it's really important that this engagement doesn't stop with a single consultation. It's maintained by the county council by linking with parish and town councils and bus user groups, and that could be done through a county transport forum. So there's a lot still to be achieved. So what I really want to finish the session today by saying is that we have lots still to do, and I hope we will all agree to carry on putting on pressure, communicating with the county council and others, and as Peter has said, we think a possible deadline of the 20th of October to sort of keep putting our priorities before the county council. And in a minute, we'll be asking you for your ideas about that. So just to sort of go back to the bus strategy and what it says, it's asking for ambitious bids. So it's really, really important that we ensure that the bid, it's not a foregone conclusion that we get the money. And certainly none of the things we've talked about can be done without this money, because there isn't enough in the kitty for Somerset County Council. Years and years of cuts to council funding from national government have made sure of that. So we have to make sure that the bid that goes in at the end of October contains a very ambitious and a very challenging recognition of the absolute need in Somerset as a rural county with a massive decline in use in bus, that bid is as exciting and innovative and challenging as it can be made, not just a kind of nod towards the idea of more buses. And I think we can help, the Bus Partnership and also you people as representatives of town and parish councils can help to make sure that the pressure is on the county council to make that a challenging bid. So we've got MPs in Somerset. And one of the things we need to be doing now is lobbying, either as groups, as councils, as individuals, lobbying our local MPs to ensure that they're telling the Secretary of State for Transport, Grant Shapps, that Somerset really is a special case, that it should be a priority area, and that it should, get the money from Bus Back Better. Because we've got all of those statistics about the decline in use, and yet there are other areas like Bristol where bus use has increased. So we have got to say we want our MPs to be lobbying the government for Somerset to be a priority in this bid. So however strong the case that is made in the improvement plan, we really have got to make sure that the MPs in Somerset are backing that and wanting Somerset to win. Otherwise, none of the things we talked about can happen. There'll be no change. It'll be business as usual, and we'll be back to where we started. So I think the important thing for us is to agree on priorities and to impress those priorities on the county council in the preparation of their improvement plan. Now, I think already the consultation and the two sessions we've had with the consultants have underline this. I mean, there are obvious priorities. More buses is one of them. Buses at weekends, buses in the evening, late and early, buses on Sundays, buses linking crucial areas, rural to urban and cross-border. So that's obviously a priority. There aren't enough buses. More information seems to be an important priority as well, that people need, even if they haven't, like me, got mobile phones, people need to be standing at bus stops with some idea of when the next bus is coming along, and they need to be getting off trains and knowing exactly where they can go on the bus and where the bus stop is, and that kind of information totally neglected, totally ignored. Everything's been sort of run in a vacuum, and I think that's got to be a priority. Information, so people aren't anxiously waiting or aren't saying, I'm not going to even try getting to the hospital for my appointment on a bus because the bus might not turn up. That kind of real-time information. And of course, more integration has to be a priority. Those I think are sort of general agreement priorities, that integrating modes of transport, providing car spaces for people to get out of their cars and get on a bus. All of those kinds of integration are very, very important. And of course, having bus stations, not closing as they have done in Taunton, but opening up in relation to existing services, train services. So modal shifts can be quite straightforward. But there will be other priorities, and we'll come to ask you in a minute, I think, what you think are the priorities. And I think the other thing to stress is that when the bus service improvement plan is published in October, there will be ongoing comment. It will be very important to scrutinise that plan and to look at how changes can be made and what further developments are needed. I mean, just to give one example that's very dear to my heart, Peter has mentioned the enhanced partnership arrangement, which is what Somerset opted for. The other option, of course, that wouldn't have been practical at that time for Somerset to go for, even if they'd wanted to, and I'm sure they don't, would have been a franchise arrangement. But it seems to me, thinking about ongoing and thinking about future engagement, there is no reason why a lobby of bus users and user groups and councils couldn't be saying, well, let's look at the long-term possibilities of franchise arrangements. Because if we want buses and we want them plentiful, I'm afraid there's very little evidence in the long term that private deregulated bus services will provide that. That's just my opinion at the moment, but it's just an example of the sort of area that I think could be moved into. So just to sort of tell you that the Somerset Bus Partnership is a core team of 4 people, those of us that have accepted the job of co-chairs, and we're all very busy in our own areas, but we think that in terms of long-term expansion, the next steps, the need to keep this as a priority issue, the development of bus services, we need to expand, and we need to have the local knowledge and experience that people like the people represented here can bring to the work we're trying to do. So what we're really saying is, our sort of plan is we like to have bus champions in every town and village. I'd personally like to see a transport forum in every town and village. We've got one in Bridgewater. It does give us an opportunity to meet with transport providers and with the county council representatives when we can. And, you know, if we could get people to accept that role of local bus champion, then I think that would be developing and expanding the aim of the Somerset Bus Partnership, because we're not going away. We want to make it a permanent feature of our sort of lobbying for better public transport. So if you listening today feel that you could offer to be a local champion, a local organiser, then please tell us that in the chat or contact us through the email address that Peter gave earlier, because we really need local knowledge and experience. We can't possibly cover the whole of Somerset. We need, you know, and it's starting to happen. As I say, I think the county council has been amazed by the engagement from parish and town councils and user groups that have responded to the consultation. But we really do need that to continue, and we need to think of a permanent way of developing it, and we'd be very happy for that to happen through the Somerset Bus Partnership. So please do get in touch. And just an example really of the sort of thing that, you know, Peter's mentioned bus stops, and that can only be done in a local way, can't it? You know, bus stops are customers. We want to build customers. We want to encourage people who don't currently use buses to get on the buses. And, you know, we've got to have the apparatus around buses looking pleasant and cheerful and welcoming. So bus stops are very important. Identifying them is something really you can do best in your locality, not just, you know, bus stops shouldn't be decided in a sort of remote way by somebody on the Transport Authority, but they should be identified clearly and be attractive and be monitored. And we need local people, local groups to be doing that kind of monitoring. And this isn't just a sort of wishful thinking. We're in a climate emergency, and all the things we're talking about aren't just about making life a bit more pleasant and a bit easy. They're absolutely essential. It's absolutely vital that we get people out of their cars and get them onto buses and trains and bicycles and using their legs. And so all of this is, you know, sounds very nice, but it's actually not just about, you know, a nice approach to living. It's about climate emergency. We've got to do it. We've got to really pull all the stops out to do that. So that's really all I have to say. I think now what we want to do is to go over and ask you what your priorities are, any things that you think we have missed, and what you think could be next steps in following up the bus service improvement plan, making sure we lobby our MPs, and making sure we lobby, of course, our county councillors and those on the county council responsible for transport policies. We've got to keep up that good work. Okay, thanks for listening.
Thanks, Glenn. I think if you end your share scheme.
Yes, I'm going to do that.
Share. Councillor John Clark has been patiently waiting to say something. John, please go ahead. I think you've unmuted yourself.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think your priorities are good. More buses, more information, more integration. But it's all about making business as usual better. And what's missing, I believe, is better technology. Now, the government's looking for ambition and it's looking for innovation. And actually, technology of buses can be enormously powerful. A lot of us, when we want to make a bus journey, the bus available goes from where we don't want it to go to where we don't want it to go to at the wrong time. And consequently, it ends up with low ridership. And then guess what? It's uneconomic. It's a great burden to the taxpayer, and it doesn't work very well. Now, when I became responsible for economic development in South Somerset in 2019, I was attracted by some work done by the government's innovation arm, which is called the Catapult for Connected Places. And they were working on, DRT was mentioned, which is demand responsive transport, which is, I'm sure, as most people know, you sort of ring up and there are local services normally run by volunteers that will actually provide a bus to come to you. But digital demand responsive transport is a very, very powerful technology, because you can have an Uber-like platform so that everyone who wants to catch a bus from wherever they are, they just like calling an Uber taxi, they call an Uber bus, if you like, and the bus then, or the software, works out a clever routing how to pick people up, and then it starts going from where you want to go, when you want to go, and to where you want to go, and of course the ridership will improve. So we started working with the government's innovation arm, this so-called Connected Places Catapult, and of course we had to work with Somerset County Council because they were the bus authority, and we gathered together an expert team of the best technologists, bus company representatives, user representatives, in order to try and sort of knock some sense into this technology and make it work. And in the last couple of years, frankly, we've lost sort of 6 or 9 months due to COVID, and some of the team that have been working on it have been sort of distracted necessarily into other tasks like distributing badly needed grants and such like. But the work has gone on, and hopefully what Somerset County Council will put forward will reflect the good work that has been done. And I think this is the way to satisfy the government's requirement for innovation and ambition, that we're not just sort of saying, okay, well, we'll take the bus system as it is, put more money in and provide more buses and more information and so on, business as usual, but a major step forward using technology. I set up a priority project for South Somerset to actually have a pilot project of this DDRT by the end of next March. Due to the delays, this isn't going to happen, but I think a lot of the spade work will be done, and we will be able to produce reports saying, if you're going to have a pilot of this, we've worked out how to do it and solve some of the problems, and that's where we've got to.
And with One Somerset, do you think this can still successfully be carried forward? I know in other meetings there have been expressions of concern that you've done this pioneering work, but unfortunately just at the key moment of rolling it out, we're having this local government reorganisation.
Well, the local government reorganisation itself will get in the way, of course, and will disrupt a lot of activities. But there's absolutely no reason why, considering we've necessarily involved, Mike O'Dowd-Jones and Natasha and other people at Somerset County. So they're very, very familiar with this work. There's no reason why it can't carry on at an officer level, because it has the momentum, it knows where it's going, and no reason at all why the One Somerset unitary new local authority should not carry on with this. I think, in fact, a lot of economic development activities like innovations, another one, should perhaps be done on a pan-county basis anyway, because a lot of the problems are similar all over the county, and presumably the county can throw sort of more concentrated resources at it than individual districts can.
Thanks, John. Go to John Hassel, who's one of our co-chairs, who might also, perhaps it's his intention anyway, but he might like just to touch on the Taunton bus station issue, which is a very major issue. John, over to you.
Yeah, I was going to continue actually on DRT.
Please do.
Because today I've spoken to one of the coach companies who say there are problems, and these problems are basically the government will want a lot more digital side to it, which they wouldn't want to take up cash machines and not cash machines, what we're talking about, the ticket machines, not the cash machines, ticket machines, because they're apparently quite costly and they don't really want to run as buses. I've suggested to them the idea that you probably remember in years gone by, we've had market day at a lot of the towns in Somerset, and the markets have gradually disappeared in most places. But the principle was there that people went into town on a Wednesday because that was market day, and they could do all their shopping and everything else. If we had a system whereby the villages got together and said, right, well, we want to go to Taunton on Thursday, can you send a bus through the local villages? They could sort of take 4 or 5 from each village. So by the time they got to Taunton, they'd be full. That would solve one of the problems. I know a lot of people today, older people today, tend to want to go into Taunton for a cup of coffee, see their friends, and also to visit people in hospital. And that's easier during the week, but not on a Sunday. So that brings in the Sunday service angle again. But the companies that will be, if you like, put together to run DRT, you've got the power station, and there are buses you use to take people to and from the power station to work. There are community travel organisations in several of our district and parish councils areas, and there are I'm losing my thread a bit, sorry. Yeah, if you can put all these together, you can have a decent DRT system. You'd also need a call centre to cover the whole of the district. I'm going to continue talking to coach companies and bus companies to try and put something together. But it is at a formative stage at the minute. I know I've only got a month, but I will try and put that together.
Hey, John, thank you. Thank you.
The bus station you mentioned, this is a difficult one because we need to get the district, the county, and anyone else, First Bus in particular, together to talk about it. Negotiations before the bus station closed just went up in the air, and First said, right, we're not going to use it as from whenever it was, which wasn't really good enough. There should have been much more negotiation, and if they wanted to close it, we should have had some alternative from them as to what they wanted. There are 2 choices now. You can either reinstate the bus station or have the boulevard system that they're starting in Swindon. So that's, to my mind, the 2 alternatives. It certainly shouldn't go over to parking.
Thanks, John. Somerset have said that it's something they're going to consult on, probably consult on in conjunction with the BSIP, but also outside of the BSIP. It is obviously a huge issue, and the government itself has said that this is not the time to be closing down bus stations. So hopefully we will see some progress there. Jane Nicklin on the chat has said, who should we lobby? We've said you should lobby. I think the first people to lobby are your county councillors. County councillors are empowered to make and approve decisions. They have access to officers, more easy access than most of us get to officers, and they should be representing your point of view. So yes, firstly, make sure that your officers are aware, your county councillors are aware of the importance of this BSIP to their local communities, and try and encourage them to demand that the Somerset BSIP is a powerful and ambitious, that's the key word, ambitious document, then as many of you are involved in local politics and therefore constituency politics, your MP, there is a real need, as Glenn has said, that we get the MPs, some of whom are particularly influential in this government, that those MPs should be saying to their colleague Grant Shapps that Somerset really does need special funding and special treatment. It's not just about the northern constituencies. Here is a constituency in the southwest with a really challenged bus service in which we need to have a priority. If you happen to know any of the senior politicians in Somerset, John Woodman is the cabinet lead on transport and is overseeing with his officers the development of the BSIP, then lobby those senior politicians as well. I think they just need to hear it from as many people as possible, just how important buses and getting an improved bus services for the people of Somerset, let alone for the climate emergency. Martin Cook.
Lovely, thank you, Peter. I'm a member of St Cuthbert Out Parish Council, the largest parish council in the country, that we completely surround the city of Wells. Two things which we've been doing several years ago, first and then Webber took off the 67 bus from Wells to Burnham-on-Sea. At that time, a partnership was put together with all the parish councils going along the B3139. And at one stage, Mendip Community Transport went from Wells to Wedmore, and then there was a transfer from Wedmore into Burnham. The Burnham route from Wedmore wasn't that successful, but from our end, it is just about, if I said breaking even commercially, that's not strictly true because it's still run by Mendip Community Transport, so it's not a complete commercial success. That service is running every day, and there's a service 67p on Saturdays. Moving things forward, and I just sent you an email, Peter, of a press release we've just put out. We've actually been talking to try and introduce a bus rail link to Castle Carey. And John, being you're in South Somerset, perhaps Peter will let you have a look at that. It's a survey going out in a major channels in our area, and that's what we're trying to do. Equally, it's mentioned, the Unitary Authority is also mentioned in this meeting a couple of times. We are also attempting to put together a coalition of neighbouring parish councils between Vinegar, Wells, North Wootton, Glastonbury and Cheddar. And we've got about in the region of 10 or 12 showing interest. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Martin. And I know from my conversations in Wales just how important this Castle Carey link is, and it's viewed understandably as a very high priority.
Could you open the email, Peter?
I've just got it. Yeah. Thanks. Anybody else like to raise an issue? Just
Peter Simmons is signalling, Peter.
Sorry,
yeah.
Peter, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. I'd like to just take two approaches to this. Firstly, I'm sorry that I haven't realised that I should be sending my input to you, and now we'll do that in the next 24 hours or so.
Thank you,
I've
Peter.
just sent it to Transport Act as per the instructions, so I will certainly be doing that. What I've done is wholly from the Somerton point of view, and I've mentioned all of the various headings that we've covered today and before, and in each one I've given a little recommendation. For instance, just one recommendation: the timetables for first bus routes 54 and 77 be reviewed to provide a better fit for purpose service as detailed above. I think it's important that if anybody makes a submission, we can all waffle on. It's easy to do so, but when you think about council meetings, how they're run, there's always a recommendation at the end of each item. And the reason I decided I wanted to come in is because this here is a map showing how essential it is that Somerton is connected to Castle Carey station. You'll probably know that there is no station between Castle Carey and Taunton, which is 28 miles. That's the longest in the west of England. So we are, of course, with the campaigning for a station here as well. But I think that's years away if it happens, and I won't be going anywhere until I can get to Castle Carey station easier, because I do not want to spend money parking there if I can get a space, and I do not want to be driving back for the night. So thanks for your time, but I do, as I say, think if anybody writes anything in, they must be clear what it is they are recommending or precisely asking for in their own parish, as it were. Thank you.
Absolutely, Peter. As you and I share an MP, I know in the past David Warburton has campaigned with me over buses. He recognises the importance of buses. Anything you can say to David to encourage him to argue the case for Somerset getting a special treatment, then I think that would be very, very helpful. And I know he's campaigning very hard for a station at Somerton and having some success. So unlike buses, which can change instantly or almost instantly, trains getting a change in the rail network takes a lot longer.
Oh, yes,
but it looks as if it's going slowly in the right direction. Just whilst we still have so many of you, can I just mention again the issue of representatives? At these meetings we've had, these Zoom meetings, we've been very aware of individual localities having special cases, and we really would like to have a representative in each village. It won't be unduly tasking. We'd probably say, give us an update every 3 months, but tell us immediately if there is a specific issue. So if you could give thought to either yourself or finding somebody in your village to be a local representative and working with the Somerset Bus Partnership, that would be good. We're also interested, and that from the sounds of it, we might well be able to build route representatives. Shepton and St Cuthbert's Outer and Wells all have, because there have been messages on the chat, a real interest, a joint interest in trying to get a bus service down to Castle Carey. It's probably too much of a stretch to say Somerton should be part of that same group. What it does do, though, is just emphasise the pivotal role that Castle Carey plays for a large part of Somerset, and a lot of thought needs to be put into the linkage to Castle Carey. I hope in your submissions you've done that, if you haven't already, there is no harm in dropping a note to Somerset County Council, just emphasising and saying, over and above the very specific local bus issues, there is this strategic requirement for us to have a good rail service up to London, which requires us to have a direct bus link to Castle Kerry. It's never too late to ask. And if you don't ask, you don't get in this world. So just be aware of that. Anybody else like to say anything? I mean, we've had 80 people, 80 councils represented in the 2 meetings, which I think shows the benefits of Zoom meetings. If we'd have called for a meeting in Taunton, I think most of it would still be travelling there. It would be a nightmare to have to get 80 people into one place in a county like Somerset with its poor public transport links and the sheer size of Somerset. It's great that through Zoom we can hold a meeting going on for an hour and a half, and then at the end of it you can all go off and enjoy the evening, hopefully in your local pub if you've got one which is open and doing business. So if there's no other points, John Hassel.
Yeah, I just thought it might be of interest that I read somewhere recently that the Woollavington branch has funding for an inquiry that comes from Bristol Temple Meads. If that comes to transition, then we're going to need a better bus service to Woollavington. Now, this will be the case with a lot of new rail lines or replacement rail lines from what we had in before the Beeching era, whichever way you look at it. So that's something else that needs to be considered, the providing of services to new stations.
Okay. Glenn.
Yes, I was just going to point out that we've already had someone offer to be a link with us from Glastonbury, and that is Lindsay McDougall. Thanks, Lindsay. Welcome. And the details are in chat, so that's a good start from today to sort of have another representative. Thanks, Lindsay. Welcome.
Martin,
Another small point.
Yeah.
2 years ago, there was a visit from, I can't remember the name of the organisation. Rail Travel Tours brought a train in with 11 carriages to East Somerset Railway using the Tor Quarry Railway network, which is linked to the main line. So that I've got a passion that I honestly think we could have Castle Kerry. We've already got that, but East Somerset Railway. I know there was plans for Shepton to have a new railway station, but that's going to cost a lot of money. But being Castle Kerry, East Somerset is already there at Cranmore, linked to the main line through the quarry. We ought to start to flag that up as well.
Thanks. We have, just before we go, we've got someone who's working with the Somerset Bus Partnership, which is also involved in working with the Wiltshire BSIP, Lee Fletcher, on the line. Lee, would you like to just say any words of encouragement or suggestions?
Well, I think it's been a very good meeting. I mean, to be honest, a lot of the points I would have raised have been raised by your good selves in your presentations, both yourself and Glenn. And I think you're definitely laying the right groundwork. As I said, we've got in option 24/7, which is Wiltshire's county-wide bus user group. We've got 17 community area representatives and separate representatives for different specific liaison groups, such as bus operator liaison, elderly disabled liaison, young persons liaison, local transport authority and DFT liaison. And yeah, to go down that structure would be, I think the right route for Somerset Bus Partnership to go. So I would echo Peter and Glenn's words, is if you can be a representative for your town and village, please do put your name forward, because we'd really appreciate it, and it would make a big difference.
Thanks, Lee. And I've just been looking at the chat. John Clark, we would very much like to learn more about the work you've been doing in South Somerset. So if you're available, we'll try and set up a Zoom meeting and talk that through with you. We could learn a lot from that. So thank you very much for that offer.
Very happy to do that.
Thanks. Okay, everyone. Time to go and enjoy I nearly said a summer evening, an autumn evening. Thank you very, very much to you all for coming to the meeting, and we look forward. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, come on, good night.
Thank you. I've done the chat.